Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. This is a pre-recording of an international webinar on teaching narrative writing. The ideas, the strategies will be taken from my book coming out in 2024, Being and Becoming Teachers of Writing. As well, lots of resources at my website, teaching-reading.com. You've got podcasts, YouTubes, LinkedIn material. As well, my podcast, The Reading Instruction Show, you see it right there. And you can find the link at my website. Lots of materials there related to teaching writing, teaching reading, and other things. So I would invite you and encourage you. So let us start our show tonight. Here are the 9 areas we hope to get to. We will get to tonight. Let's start out with the first one, writing and writers. What is writing? It's expressing meaning with print. It's creating meaning with print. It's transmitting ideas. Big idea number 2. Every child and adult can write. Every child can write starting in kindergarten, maybe even in preschool. They may rely more on picture clues than letter clues, but they can use print to create and express meaning. It's a developmentally process. And every student, every adult can learn to write well if you teach the process. You teach the process to develop the skill, and you get better at anything by practicing. Writers need to write every day. You don't get better at anything if you don't practice. We have choir practice, we have volleyball practice, we have piano practice. We should have writing practice as well. We teach the process to develop the skill. Writing is one of the most undertaught skills in our K-12 and higher education curriculums. Why? Because we do not teach the process. We simply teach what the finished product should look like instead of teaching each one of these steps. The pre-writing, generating ideas, listing, brainstorming, what goes on before writing. We use graphic organizers to organize idea, inductive analysis to find the groups, put ideas into groups. Expository writing usually involves some sort of data collection of some sort. This is step number 1. Step number 2 is the draft, the first attempt to get ideas on the paper. The goal is just to capture a whole bunch of words on the paper. To use an analogy, it's like a potter throwing a blob of clay on the pot. And that first blob of clay should look like a blob of clay and not a pot. You cannot write well if you're not first willing to write poorly, if you're not first willing to throw the blob on the clay. Writers that get stuck are usually trying to edit during this stage. Step 2 is simply get words on the page. Step 3 is the heart of the writing process, revising. Revising again and again and again. That means revisits, reshaping. You're shaping that pot. Review, seeing again many times. And you're shaping, you're taking away, you're putting stuff on. You're shaping that pot, that piece of writing. Step 4 is the editing stage. Here is where you look for grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors. Doing step 4 during steps 1, 2, or 3 is a good way to ruin any writing project if you insist that step 4 be done in the earlier steps. We have limited space in short-term memory if we're worrying about the edits, about punctuation, getting it just right during the pre-write, drafting, and revising stage. The flow of idea suffer. We have limited space in short-term memory. We don't want to fill it full of multiple things. So do not focus on step 4 until you get to step 4. Step 5 is publishing and sharing with real people. Sharing makes writing come alive. To develop a sense of audience, the best way to do this is to give students an audience. uh, allow them to share their writing with real people. It becomes alive, it becomes real. So here students read their work aloud, they share in small groups, they publish some form of publication, but they're sharing their work and they're getting responses from their work instead of just correcting errors. Those are the 5 steps. Most of the writing activities you do in class will be simply pre-write, write, and share. A lot of these will take 2 to no more than 10 minutes. What I do when I create a writing activity, I watch the pencils or the fingers if they're typing, and when I see the energy begin to leave, I'll say, take another minute to finish up your idea, and we'll be sharing in small group. It's usually around 5 or 6 minutes or so, and I do this with my elementary students. I do it with my undergraduate students in my college class. Quick and easy, and then you share. To share doesn't have to be complicated. Sharing in small group is usually the best. Groups of 3 to 4, each child reads their work. Or with a partner, turn to a partner. Partner swap, where you actually read and write right on the paper. Or author's chair, where once a day someone shares their work. Just one person a day, maybe 2 at the most, to the whole class. Those are just some sharing ideas. Now, you're creating a lot of drafts in these daily writing activities. Drafts should be put in a file folder or a notebook or a milk carton someplace on the shelf, but not in students' desks. This makes them kind of a sacred space. They don't get lost, they don't get crumpled up. And you can do a lot of progress monitoring and informal assessment simply by looking through these file folders to get a sense of your students as writers. The drafts. Now, Donald Graves says only about 1 out of 5 of these drafts are hot topics. That means only about 1 or 5 do students want to take to the revision stage. So not every draft should be taken to the revision stage. You and I, when we write, some of our stuff we think is going to be good, but it just isn't. And it's okay. You should have choices about what to write and about what things to take to the revision process and what things not to take to the revision process. Now, the thing about sharing, over time, it develops community. If you're sharing real thoughts, it enables understanding of other human beings. You have real human beings sharing real ideas. And you will get a feel for your class. There's certain things you can share in the middle and end of the year that you can't at the beginning until you establish that community. So the writing prompts you do at the beginning of the year may not be as revealing as some in the middle and the end. Develops community. And I already said this, just like tennis practice and choir practice, I cannot say this enough. You need to practice every day. It should not be cut because you have something special going on. And here is one of the big ideas that you will see reinforced. Ideas always beget more ideas. As we encounter a word or an idea, our brain naturally associates and connects. When I say the word cat, your brain automatically makes connections to cat-like things. So a lot of these ideas call for students to generate and organize ideas, allow them to see ideas, to get the ideas out, to brainstorm, and then you can begin to connect to other ideas. It's all about the ideas. And by the way, that's the importance of not evaluating during the brainstorming process of any kind. Get the ideas out there. There are 6 types of writing that should be included in a K-12 writing curriculum. Most standards only include the first 3. I recommend that these 3, inquiry writing, the arts, and communication, also be included in a K-12 curriculum. And we will have other videos looking at these types of writing. But tonight's topic is narrative writing, And that starts with a definition. It's a type of writing that describes events or experiences in which the writer is narrating. These can be real or imagined. The writer is narrating, hence the term narrative writing. Different types of narrative writing often include biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, stories, realistic fiction, historical fiction, and even news reporting. But here is where we use adjectives and dialogues, similes and metaphors to bring the piece to life, to create a movie in the reader's head with narrative writing. Now, with narrative writing, we also have to consider point of view. Who will be telling the story or describing the events? Will it be a particular person? Will it be a faceless, objective voice hovering in space? Or will it be the writer? This determines the pronouns used. Now, a pronoun is something that takes the place of a noun. Polly runs fast. Polly is a great soccer player. Instead of repeating Polly, she. She is the pronoun there. What does that have to do with narrative writing, you say? Well, first person. You're describing the events through your eyes. You use I, me, we, and us pronouns. These are the personal pronouns. We use these in autobiographies, personal narratives, memoirs, and sometimes fiction. When I am teaching writing, I always give my students plenty of thinking time, first person. I spent the first 28 years of my life hiding behind my third person voice like a timid little mouse. When I could finally bring myself into my writing, I felt liberated. Get the idea. Second person, you address the reader directly. Used most often when describing how to do something or how to explain something. The writer breaks through the wall of objectivity slightly and addresses the reader directly. Usually used for explaining things. You and your pronouns. When you are teaching writing, give your students plenty of thinking time. You will find. If you were to encounter the little bald man in his office, you'd see him joyfully writing in the first person. You get the idea. You and your kind of breaking through this wall, this illusion of this wall to directly address the reader. And I was thinking about some of these old Bob Hope and Marx Brothers movies. Sometimes the actor turns to the camera and addresses the audience directly. That's the fourth wall. Kind of something like that can be used with narrative text to break the wall. So that can be used with narrative or expository text. All right, third person. Writing about others. Sometimes you are totally objective here. Here the writer takes him or herself completely out of the writing. Personal pronouns are prohibited in order to create this illusion of objectivity. Usually written in the third person are books, articles, reports, she, her, him, they, them, biographies, sometimes fiction, often nonfiction. When teaching writing, give students sufficient thinking time. There are no pronouns there. The professor was writing in the first person. This made him, there's one pronoun, happy. So you can remove all the pronouns, or you can use third person pronouns. Here is kind of an overview of first person, second person, and third person. 6 types of narrative writing. The first one is the biography, where you're describing the lives of other people, usually written in the third person. It involves some types of research, usually to get information about these other persons. She, he, her, him, they, them. And here, accuracy of information and chronology, things put in the right order, are important. Autobiography, the writer is describing his or her life, usually written in the first person. It's an extended personal narrative, often in chronological order, and adjectives, dialogues, metaphors, and similes are all used to make the work come to life, to keep the reader engaged, to create that movie in the head. The third one is personal narratives, similar to the autobiography, except you're describing events, shorter bits of events that have happened to the writer. Often it includes dialogue, and again, you want that rich description of people and places to make it come to life, to keep the reader engaged. Memoirs are memories from an episodes from a person's life, usually used with older students, written in the first person. The memoir is an interpretation of memories, interpretation of the life. It doesn't have to be in chronological order, and it doesn't even have to be factual. The writer is free to interpret these memories. So these can be a lot of fun. But usually older readers, you would not be using memoirs with first and second graders. And then creative writing, that can include a variety of genre: fantasy, creative fiction, science fiction, historical fiction, even realistic fiction. And again, the purpose is to entertain, to inform, to inspire. We like these rich descriptions to keep the audience engaged. Metaphor, simile, and dialogue make it come to life. And then the last one, news stories. Included here, yes, because you are narrating information or events that have occurred or are occurring. News stories are often told in narrative form, and that's why I included them here. Accuracy and chronology and precision of word choice are important. But these are usually written in the objective third person narrative. So, the big picture, however, most of us in our real lives outside of an education setting will never have to do this kind of writing. Unless we're famous people, novelists, obituary writers, or screenwriters. In the real world, most of us have never been asked to use narrative writing. Most of us will never have to use the skills associated with narrative writing. For example, in my adult life, I've never been asked to go back and add more detail to a report or colorful language. In any of my journal articles, I've never been asked to include dialogue or metaphors. I've yet to get an email returned to me because it didn't have an introduction that captured the reader's attention. And in my technical writing, my memos, my academic writing, business writing, these have never been rejected because the endings were lackluster and disappointing. So the question is, why? Why am I creating this webinar, this video on narrative writing? Why should narrative writing be included in our K-12 curriculums if so little of it is used in our adult real-world lives? Well, I'll tell you why. First, the process transfers. The 5-step writing process is germane to any type of writing. The same process for narrative writing is used for writing reports and articles in any type of professional writing. Once students learn the process, they can transfer this. And it develops precision of word choice. Students are able to see the impact of individual words on the reader. This enables the writer to become more precise with their word selection. And the skills learned about word choice and sentence construction transfer to any type of writing. It enhances the language arts. It puts the art back in language arts. And why do we have art of any kind? It's a way of seeing and being in the world. The arts communicate things that descriptions cannot. It enhances us. It enhances our view of the world. The arts help us understand others and ourselves. The art communicates in ways that non-art cannot. Art creeps into the small, narrow corners of the soul, expressing things in a way that linear descriptions cannot. And narrative writing humanizes learning, including biographies, to enhance all subject areas. Humans learn best through stories. As well, students are more motivated to write and to read narratives. We like to write stories. We like to read stories. We go to movies to hear stories and watch stories. And finally, narrative writing can be used to understand yourself and others, part of identity formation. Reading the biographies, autobiographies, and personal narratives of others helps you understand others and see yourself in a greater context. So, some activities first for biographies and the Oprah interview. Here, the writer does research on a particular person and takes on the persona of that person. And an interview is conducted, just like a TV interview show. Another person takes the Oprah role and asks questions, prepares these questions ahead of time, and interviews the guest. Now, if the guest doesn't know the answer, the guest should be encouraged to think like that person, to use their knowledge of that person to respond as best they can. For biographies, number 2 is the hot seat. Again, after doing research on a person for a biography, a volunteer sits in the hot seat in front of the class, takes on that persona, very much like a press conference, and anyone in the class can ask a question of that person. And if the person doesn't know the answer, they should be encouraged to take on the persona and answer as best they can. Dialogues are great, where you have a dialogue with the famous person, real or imaginary. Sometimes this is done in pairs or small groups, where you actually talk to each other and write down the dialogue. You have the conversation. And it's okay to get silly here because it is still based in fact. John Adams, second president of the United States. Andy, you silly little bald man, why are you including me in this ridiculous book of yours? I always thought you were an interesting character. Interesting? What makes you think I was interesting? Well, you were the second president of the United States. Yes, I know that, but I lost my re-election to that detestable Thomas Jefferson. Lots of people lose re-elections to be president of the United States. Oh, really? Well, maybe not lots, but you get the idea. These can be fun, these can be silly, and you can practice reading. I like this for struggling readers because you see the dialogue and it's repeated time again, and people can be successful with this. But dialogues are always fun, and you are learning at different levels because even if it is silly, you're bringing facts into the dialogue. And simulated journal entries. Here again, the writer takes on the role of their biography subject, creates journal entries describing events from the point of view of their subject. All right, some activities for personal narratives or autobiographies. Another character, the student describes an episode or event from their lives written from the perspective of another person in that scene or that character using first-person narrative. So I would write a description of my tennis match, and I would become the other character describing playing tennis with the silly little bald man who can't play tennis very well. Third-person narrative. I tried this with my class, and it actually worked pretty good. Students describe an event or episode from their lives using an objective third-person narrative. Future self, starting at some point in the future, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, next week. Students describe events and episodes from an imaginary future life. Past life, students go back in time to describe events or episodes, but give it a different ending. And a parallel universe. The writer describes events or episodes using creative writing to insert imaginary characters and fictitious events. This is fun. And writers are more apt to want to write this stuff than write a report on the grain export from Bolivia or whatever it is. All right, the heart of the matter now. 15 scaffolds for narrative writing, and scaffolds are a temporary structure designed to become obsolete as soon as the building are completed. So these scaffolds are designed to be temporary structures that enable the writer to learn different forms of writing. Scaffolds are not meant to be eternal entities, and the form that we learn should never become more important than the function. Meaning, even though we have a form or a scaffold, the ideas should always take center stage, take precedence. And this is based on the idea that ideas always beget more ideas. Some of these scaffolds you see are just used to get the ideas out so you can see them, generate these ideas, and enables the brain to naturally make these connections. And like anything, nothing works fresh out of the package from here to there. Always adopt and adapt to meet your needs. All right, 15 simple ideas. Timeline is a very low-tech idea. Simply list the events you want in your story, your narrative. And by the way, I'm going to say story. And story will be used to indicate biographies, autobiographies, all types of narrative writing. We'll call them stories. So as you list events from your story, you begin to see other events and it fills in, and sometimes characters appear that you can include as well. Very low tech. Cartoon boxes used with younger students. 3 to 5, they draw the picture first, and then they write using temporary spelling. Or an adult comes and says, "What do you want to say here?" and writes a sentence in each box. Adopt and adapt. This is an idea I got from Graham and Harris. Sometimes your story ideas disrupt the creative thinking and get in the way. So if you just generate words, see them appearing on the page, you beget more ideas, and then you can use this as a scaffold. This is used for all types of writing. For example, you list your story ideas here, and then you start thinking of actions, verbs that you want to occur in this story, and describing words from that story. Then you write your draft, and as the draft appears, you use the actions and the describing words. Adopt and adapt. Story idea, generate, start your draft. And these are the steps. You can stop the video here. If you email me, I will send you a list of these. Events, character strategy, similar thing. But you get to list the events, but not necessarily in linear and chronological form. And the characters arise. Here's my story idea. What sorts of things would you like to happen in this story? Characters arise, and then use this to write your first draft. So that's a scaffold used for your first draft. This is a great pre-writing activity. And these are the ideas. You can stop the video here if you wish. Beginning, middle, and end. Here you think of the story as a whole, and you think of what happens at the beginning and closure. Story, event, or idea. Couple characters. What's going to happen at the beginning of this episode? You think in terms of ending episode. Some people start here, and then middle. So you see the structure of the story, and this is used to write your draft. You're thinking of your story in discrete stages. Here are the steps. You can stop if you wish. Problemizer. Most stories are built around a problem of some sort. So you have characters, and you can put your characters in first or last, but you decide on a problem. Harry wanted to get a new bike, but he didn't have the money. Solution, and then steps to get there. This is the solution. And you list the steps, and this becomes then used for your draft. Describing the problem, the steps, and the ultimate solution. Problemizer. Characters there. This is another form of problem solving. A problem is the difference between current and desired states. To solve the problem, you move from beginning to ending state. So, beginning state, this is where I'd like to end. And you just list a series of events or episodes or things that must happen. You just start listing. They don't have to be in chronological order. And that then becomes a scaffold to use for your draft. Means end analysis. Beginning state, ending state. How do I get there? Means to the end. Steps. And the last problem-solving one, creative problem-solving. Now, this is a common problem-solving strategy. And again, most stories revolve around a problem. So you state the problem and you generate ideas. This is the brainstorming part where you do not evaluate. You get all the ideas out there. And then you pick your most interesting solution to the problem and elaborate and refine. And use this, and you'll find that many of your possible solutions usually are in your story somehow. And you see the ideas. And this is best for fiction. Basic story grammar. This can be used with fiction or nonfiction. Idea or event, characters, things that happen, and the different settings. This is the basic story grammar. This is used then for the draft. It's a scaffold. Characters, events, settings. Fiction, nonfiction. Steps. Scene writing. And this can be used for fiction or nonfiction. And this enables you to create that movie in the head, much like a movie director. You're thinking about where the scenes take place to make the scene come alive. Here's the scene. This is where it is. What would you see there? Actions taking place, sounds, smells, emotions, feels, textures. And then you use that to write a draft of what takes place in that scene. Basic ideas, adopt and adapt. Metaphorser, chart for narrative writing to get more descriptive language into the narration for metaphors or similes. You identify a thing or event and then associations with it and use that to create a metaphor or a simile. One or two of these. And then you take that. Usually you write the draft first and then you create the metaphorser to add depth and dimension to the draft. Draft, things or events, metaphorser, and then go back and insert these into the story during your revising stage. So that's usually done after the draft. Adjectivizer, more colorful language. Teach the power of words and adjectives. And again, this is usually done after the draft. List the person, place, or thing there and just generate describing words. During the draft, the revision, you're able to go and put these adjectives into your story. And again, person, place, or thing, one of these, and just a whole bunch of describing words. Ideas beget more ideas. That's why we're listing these, by the way. And then after the draft, these are inserted into sentences. Ideas beget more ideas. Dialoguer for narrative writing makes the characters come to life. If you're working with one or more students, the students can actually have the dialogue and actually write down what they say when they are in character, record what the students say. But here, you're recording between dialogue reactions, movements. That would be the inner thoughts or outer actions. So you see inner, outer. Character A, inner, outer. Character B, inner, outer. You're creating this dialogue, and not all of it goes into the story, but it creates a backstory to help you understand your characters. This is done usually after the draft if you want to get some dialogue into your story. Dialoguer. The newsograph for narrative writing. You capture the story, just list the ideas as best you can. Then you identify the important details: who, where, when, how, why. Use this to create your draft. And again, ideas beget more ideas. You see the ideas, just basically associating, brainstorming what happened. Then you can put it in order. And this is used then to create your draft. And the last one, prime the pump to get ideas flowing. Now, those of you who are old enough, remember when we had these hand pumps, you had to pour water in to prime it to get the water to come out. Well, prime the pump is similar. It's where you read a short passage or personal narrative, ideally one that you have written, and you tell students as you listen, think about a time when, so you get the ideas going. Then after you say, okay, what do you want to say about, describe a time when you, gets the ideas going. Prime the pump. Final words, you teach the process to develop the skill. 5-step writing process. 6 types of writing: narrative, expository. 6 types of narrative writing: autobiography, biography, personal narrative, memoirs. The process used for narrative writing transfers to all other types of writing. Scaffolds are temporary structures for learning different writing forms. The form should never be more important than the function, and always adopt and adapt.